So this is CJ Baker, and every day I've been listening to a different album that appears in the book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. And I just finished my ninth week. So just like I did in previous weeks, this is my recap video, which is basically me posting my previous reviews, but because I post them as 3 minute shorts and I need to edit out some of the content occasionally, some of these videos might feature bonus content. So if you want me to keep making these videos, please like and subscribe. And then afterwards, I'll give you my general observations and my updated rankings. And I'll answer the question, do the albums I listened to this week belong in the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die? Please enjoy. Today's randomly generated album is Rid of Me by PJ Harvey, released in 1993. So the album has really strong bookends. Like it opens with the title track, which is very grungy, and it does make really effective use of the loud soft dynamic. And then it closes with the track Ecstasy, which just is really grimy and sludgy. The album also features my favorite track off the album, 50 Foot Queenie, which I always assumed was the most well-known track on the album, but it looks like based on streaming numbers that might not be the case. But I do remember the song getting a decent amount of rotation on the Toronto alternative rock station 102.1 The Edge, and I remember getting some rotation on Much Music.
It's Mallory. It's that chick from Family Ties.
This is really noisy.
Yeah, noise is cool.
This chick is weird.
That song's just an absolute banger. It's just chaotic in the best possible way. Another highlight on the album is a cover of Highway 61 Revisited by Bob Dylan. Her parents were big Dylan fans, and they suggested that she covers that song. Good call, parents. Good job recommending that. The album was also produced by Steve Albini, who notably also produced In Utero by Nevermind. The reason why Kurt Cobain wanted Steve Albini to produce In Utero was actually because Steve Albini produced a couple of his favorite albums, Pod by the Beatles and Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. But it is interesting to note that Steve Albini sent Kurt Cobain an unreleased copy of this album just to highlight what could potentially be done in the recording studios. And Kurt Cobain was impressed by the sound of this album. It's also good to note that Kurt Cobain in general was a fan of PJ Harvey. PJ Harvey's 1992 album Dry appeared in Kurt Cobain's list of 50 albums that influenced Nirvana. So I would say there's some similarities sound-wise to Rid of Me and In Utero. Like, for example, they both have a similar abrasiveness to it, but also within that abrasiveness, there's moments of beauty and power. But yeah, overall, this is a really solid, excellent album. I give it 4.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Rock and Soul by Solomon Burke, released in 1964. The album opens really strong with Cry to Me. There's a lot of like yearning in his voice and a lot of like raw emotion. And it's something that just really, especially on this song, gives you goosebumps. Yes, the song also has some really nice backing vocal harmonies and even just the overall vibe of the song, like everything. It's just a really excellent way to open the album, and it's by far my favorite song. The second song, Just Out of Reach, unfortunately, all the positive things I just said about the first song, they basically strip away from this tune. I mean, Burke always sounds good. Like he just has a phenomenal voice. But unfortunately, on this particular song, the musical arrangement does him no favors, and the song is just really bland. Fortunately, it picks up a bit with the next three songs. Goodbye, Baby, If You Need Me, and Can't Nobody Love You. And once again, with the musical arrangement, it really allows Burke's vocals to take center stage. And once again, there's that emotional impact with the vocals. There's a bit more raw emotion and grit to both his vocals and the music. And I think that's something I've said before with soul music. I generally like my soul with a bit more grit to it. And some of these songs do fall a bit flat as far as that goes. The album is definitely top heavy, and the rest of the songs, the musical arrangement, it's very one note, it's very bland. But like I said, Burke's vocals, he's just a phenomenal vocalist. So some of the songs, I think because the arrangements don't necessarily allow his voice to shine, it doesn't necessarily have the same emotional impact, but his voice is always going to sound good. It's kind of like that cliche that you hear that someone is such a good singer they can sing the phone book. Solomon Burke has that kind of voice, but unfortunately, for a lot of the songs on the album, it would be a lot more interesting if he was actually singing the phone book. But I think that this album, to a certain extent, I think is a product of that era. Back then, the focus was more on the singles. So the whole idea is you release like 3 or 4 singles, and hopefully a couple of them become hits, and then the rest of the album is fill. So that's very much the case with this album. But the album has enough strong moments that I still mostly enjoyed it. So I will give the album 3.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Buffalo Springfield Again by Buffalo Springfield, released in 1967. So the three main songwriters and vocalists of Buffalo Springfield were Neil Young, Stephen Stills, who of course was also with Neil Young and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and then Richard Furry, who later on would also be in Poco. So we'll get right into it by discussing the three songs that Neil Young wrote. So I'm a huge Neil Young fan, and the first concert I actually went to was a Neil Young Pearl Jam double bill at the now defunct Exhibition Stadium in Toronto. So I went mainly because I was a Pearl Jam fan, but after seeing Neil Young live, I became a huge Neil Young fan. And almost immediately afterwards, I ended up purchasing the anthology Decades. So all three of the songs on this album, Mr. Soul, Expecting to Fly, and Broken Arrow, was also on Decades. And I also want to say that I think is one of the best greatest hit collections of all time. So at the time, I actually just assumed that these were Neil Young's solo songs. I didn't realize that when I was younger that they were Buffalo Springfield. But we'll get into the three songs. The album opens with Mr. Soul, my favorite song on the album, a psychedelic rock classic, and there's a bit of a punky energy to it. And then we got Expecting to Fly, gorgeous tune. And then it closes with Broken Arrow, so that makes for really strong bookends. And Broken Arrow is a really epic tune that also makes really good use of sampling. Then we got 4 songs written by Stephen Stills, Every Days, Bluebird, Hung Upside Down, and Rock and Roll Woman. So Bluebird and Rock and Roll Woman in particular are both really good. The other 2 songs are fine as well, and the song Hung Upside Down even reminds me a little bit of the Guess who would have been contemporaries. And also, a couple of those songs also have some really good guitar playing. And then we got the 3 Richie Fury songs. I mean, I don't necessarily mind the one song, Good Time Boy, which actually features a different vocalist, a drummer, Dewey Martin. But the other 2 Richard Fury songs, A Child's Claim to Fame and Sad Memory, especially Sad Memory, they're just way too soft rock for me. And it kind of reminds me of something that Poco would do. And I'm not a fan of Poco. So yeah, those songs are kind of meh. and unfortunately they bring down the album a little bit, but overall still a really strong album, 4 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Rising Above Bedlam from Jaw Wobble's Invaders of the Heart, released in 1991. So Jaw Wobble, despite the name, is a British white dude, and the reason why he was called Jaw Wobble is one day a drunken Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols slurred his name, and then he just ended up adopting the name. Also, Jaw Wobble was the basis in Public Image Limited with Johnny Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten. So getting into this album, it's a fusion album, so it fuses music from a variety of different cultures. The first track, which is my favorite song on the album, Visions of You, which also features vocals from Sinead O'Connell, and I'm a huge O'Connell fan. And there's also some interesting things going on musically on that song. Unfortunately, the song is brought down a bit. This is the issue for the entire album. It's brought down because of Wobble's vocals. Quite frankly, he's just a horrendous vocalist. Quite often, I am a fan of vocalists who don't necessarily have a good singing voice in the traditional sense, but they have a recognizable, distinctive voice, and they know how to use their vocals to articulate the message. But that's not Wobble. He's just absolutely terrible. And that's by far my biggest issue on the album. And it's really a shame because, for example, on that track, Visions of You, the song would be so much better if it was just Sinead O'Connell singing. And then on the rest of the album, Wobble shares vocals with Natasha Allen, Arabic fusion artist, who also has a really good singing voice. So yeah, it'd be so much better if Wobble just stuck with the musical arrangements and didn't sing at all. As far as the actual music goes and the fusion, there is some interesting things going on, so I mostly didn't mind the music. But I do think, as far as the incorporation of different cultures with the music, I do think it was a bit watered down, and I think it did lack some authenticity. I didn't hate it musically. Like, my absolute biggest issue was Wobble's vocals. Like, anytime I heard his voice, it just made me cringe, and it made it hard to enjoy the album. I'll give the album 3 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Nilsson Schmilsson, released by Harvey Nilsson in 1971. So the album has really strong bookends. Like, it opens with Gotta Get Up, which is a definite banger. And it would definitely be a good song to put as the alarm on your phone to wake you up in the morning. And then the closing track is I'll Never Leave You, which is very melancholic and whimsical. And it almost gives me Elliott Smith vibes. And I get Elliott Smith came years later, but it's basically the Smith connection. It's more on just this particular song where it sounds similar to me, but maybe I'm just dumb. So the most well-known song on the album is the cover of Badfinger's Without You, and sadly, both of the songwriters, Pete Ham and Tom Evans, tragically died way too young. Pete Ham, a member of the 27 Club, and Tom Evans was only 36. And it was a tragic tale. Like, basically, they had a shady band manager who totally fleeced them. But concerning the actual song, I'm kind of on the fence about it. Like, it's way too melodramatic. Like, while you're listening to it, I'm thinking, dude, chill out, man, chill out. But it would definitely be a good song to listen to if you're heartbroken, depressed, you need an ugly cry while eating a tub of Haagen-Dazs. And it's also a really fun song to sing along to. Can't live if the feeling is without you, without you. reading the top of Haagen-Dazs all alone. And then the other song that's probably the second most well-known song on the album, which I'm also kind of on the fence about, is Coconut. It's definitely a bit of an annoying novelty tune, but it's also kind of catchy and fun to sing along to. The lime in the coconut you drink and bought up. The lime in the coconut you drink and bought up. The lime in the coconut you drink and bought up. The lime in the coconut, call your doctor, hook him up. So yeah, it is kind of a fun song to sing really badly to. Mind you, singing badly is the only way I sing. The other song on the album that I like is Jump Into the Fire, which is also a banger. So overall, a really enjoyable album. I like it. A few really well-known, memorable tunes, and even the songs that I'm kind of on the fence about. At least I have to acknowledge that they're kind of catchy. So yeah, I'll give it 4 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Gasoline Alley by Rod Stewart, released in 1970. So Rod Stewart is someone I'm kind of on the fence about. I do like some of the songs that he recorded with the Faces, and he does have the odd song I like, such as Maggie May is a banger, but he also has a lot of stuff that, quite frankly, I just think is really cheesy. But we'll get into this album. So out of the 9 tracks on the album, it's 3 originals and 6 covers. And my favorite song on the album is probably one of the originals. It's the opening track and the title track, Gasoline Alley. And it's a decent tune. The other 2 originals, Lady Day and George Lamont, they both to me are just really bland and just kind of really cheesy, and I'm just not into those songs. Out of the 6 covers, none of them are bad, but none of them are essential versions of the song either. They're just kind of there. And that's what I will say about this album. This is one of the albums that are in the book 1001 albums you must hear before you die, which I'm a bit puzzled why it's in the book. I can't really see anyone listening to this album and thinking to themselves, I want to start a generic rock band so I can make a generic rock album of mostly covers. Like, there's nothing particularly influential or groundbreaking. Like, to me, this is the epitome of just a forgettable album. So I didn't like it. I didn't hate it. I'll give it 3 stars. Probably never gonna think about it ever again. Today's randomly generated album is OG, Original Gangster by Ice-T, released in 1991. So I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of gangster rap, but one thing I will say about this album, I do appreciate the gritty realism of the lyrics, and I like the hard-hittenness of the music. And another thing I would say is I don't think this album necessarily glorifies the gangster lifestyle. If anything, I consider it more as a morality or cautionary tale. I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of incisive social commentary on the album as well. Like, a lot of the songs do address issues as systemic racism and police brutality. Like, one of the highlights in connection with that is the song Escape from the Killing Fields, which definitely discuss those issues. And it's probably my favorite track on the album. And another highlight is Body Count, which is the debut of Ice-T's heavy metal project of the same name. And the song also appears on Body Count's 1992 self-titled debut. So the song actually opens with Ice-T giving a spoken word intro, and he's basically addressing those that, like, it's an interview clip where he's addressing those that feel that he's selling out because of incorporated rock music into his music. And he's basically highlighting the fact that rock and roll has its roots in black culture. But yeah, that song Body Count also discusses the issue of police brutality and systemic racism as well. And it actually touches upon similar issues to Body Count's controversial tune, Top Kill. So there's some parallels there, even though it's a bit less explicit. So my biggest issue with the album is that it's way too long, which unfortunately is an issue during the CD era. And also, I'm not a big fan of the skits, which is quite often an issue with rap music for me. But otherwise, it's still a pretty solid album that hits pretty hard. So I'll give it 4 stars. So concludes the weekly recap. And overall, it was a decent week. There was no 5-star albums, but there was a 4.5-star album, 3 4-star albums, and there was nothing below 3 stars. So now we'll take a look at the updated rankings. So the top albums have all stayed the same. The best album this week was PJ Harvey, who's now at the number 13th spot. We can scroll down. We have a couple new 4-star albums with Buffalo Springfield and Harvey Nilsson. And we'll scroll down a bit, and then not too much changes on the bottom. So we still got the 3 albums below 3 stars, and then my least favorite albums this week, Wobble's Invaders of the Heart and Rod Stewart. So that's the updated rankings. So you can feel free to let me know in the comments about what you think of the rankings, and whether or not you think that I ranked any too high, too low. You can let me know if I'm a total idiot, but please do so respectfully. But then the question we're going to ask now, that we ask every week, do these albums deserve to be in the book? 1,001 albums you must hear before you die. And as I also mention every week, of course, that's hyperbole, because you can live a perfectly happy life and not listen to any of these albums, unless you're just a totally miserable SOB. But essentially, the question is, are these essential, influential, important albums? So there's a couple albums that I would argue do not belong in the book this week. So the 2 big ones is Wobble and then Rod Stewart's Gasoline Alley. So in the case of Wobble, even if you're trying to include some world music albums and some fusion albums, which I think you should definitely include in the list, there are albums that are definitely far more authentic and are far more influential and important. So yeah, that's one album I probably would not have included on the list. And then concerning Rod Stewart, I've never done a Rod Stewart deep dive, so I don't know if this is considered one of the better Rod Stewart albums or not. But from my perspective of listening to it, it was a very bland, generic album. And like I mentioned in the video clip, I don't really see anyone listening to this album and saying, hey, I want to become a rock star and start a band. So once again, I just don't think that album is all that important and influential. The only other album I might question a bit is Solomon Burke. And I do think Solomon Burke is an important artist in the development of soul music. But I think with Burke, it's more about the songs. So even with the songs, like Cry to Me, if you were to make a list of 1,001 songs you must hear before you die, you can make a strong argument to include that song. But the actual album, it was basically a few singles and mostly filler, so I don't think it's necessarily an important album per se. But otherwise, I don't necessarily have any issue with the other albums on the list. So if you want me to keep making content like this, please like and subscribe. And also, as I previously mentioned, every day I listen to a new randomly generated album. So you can also check out the playlist where all the videos are curated as well. So it's a nice handy way of catching up on any of the videos you haven't watched yet. And there's also a playlist of the weekly recaps. So before I conclude, I just want to mention one last thing. So for making my videos, I use Riverside to record and edit. And Riverside has many helpful features, not just for recording and editing. They also have helpful features for podcast hosting and webinars. But one thing I really appreciate about Riverside in the past, quite often when I would try to upload my videos to YouTube, sometimes it would take even hours to upload, but now it takes a matter of seconds. So that process has really been streamlined. So if you want to try Riverside, I'll put a link in the description, and you could even try it 1 month for free. And then also, you can feel free to check out my website, Ongoing History of Protest Songs.com. So thanks for watching, and please stay safe.